Pam Bondi removes judge who erodes judicial independence. John Roberts pays his career. The marble halls of the Supreme Court gleamed under the dome of America's most sacred legal institution. Silence lingered in the chambers, but the air was charged. Something had shifted. Behind closed doors, whispers echoed, louder than gavels. Pam Bondi stood at the far end of the room, calm but resolute. The former Florida Attorney General wasn't here by accident. She had been invited, summoned, really, by a small coalition of senior legal figures growing uneasy with the court's direction. But what she brought wasn't just concern. She brought evidence across from her. In the shadows of the high bench, Chief Justice John Roberts adjusted his robe. He rarely attended private sessions like this, but today was different. Today, he was the subject. Pam's voice was steady. This isn't about politics. This is about integrity. She laid a thick manila folder on the oak table. Inside were printouts, dot screenshots, and transcripts. A quiet thud echoed through the chamber. American Inns of Court, she said. An elite. Invite only legal society. On the surface, it promotes legal professionalism. But peel it back, and you'll find a highly coordinated network of progressive legal influencers, federal judges, prosecutors, and yes, Supreme Court justices. Justice Roberts didn't move. Pam continued. Your name appears not just in their member registry, but also as an honorary figure within the Middle Temple, their British counterpart, an institution with direct funding ties to George Soros. The room stirred. One of the justices raised an eyebrow, another leaned forward. George Soros, someone murmured. Pam nodded. It gets worse. Judge James Boasberg, Judge Beryl Howell, Judge Amit Mehta, and Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, also members. These are not impartial jurists. They've consistently ruled to obstruct former President Trump's executive orders on immigration, national security, election oversight. Roberts finally spoke. His voice was measured, but sharp. Membership does not imply conspiracy, Ms. Bondi. These are esteemed legal professionals. Pam's gaze didn't flinch. And yet, when Boasberg blocked Trump's deportation order, it was you, Chief Justice of the United States, who rushed to defend him publicly. That's my role, Roberts replied. To defend judicial independence? No, she said. Your role is to defend impartiality. But when judges gather in secret, share platforms with political spouses like Doug Emhoff, Kamala Harris's husband, and give each other awards for locking up January 6th protesters, that's not independence. That's collusion. Silence. Roberts looked down at his notes, then back at her. These are serious accusations. Do you have proof? Pam opened the folder. Here's the guest list for an Inns of Court event. Last fall. Roberts, Boasberg, Imhoff. And here's the award citation given to Judge Howell just days after her ruling that extended pretrial detention for January 6 defendants. She slid the papers forward. One justice picked them up, squinting. Another quietly took photos with a phone. This isn't just bad optics, Pam continued. This is systemic bias. And worse, it's coordinated. She leaned forward. If it were any other government branch, this would be called a shadow cabal. The room was still. Then Justice Alito spoke. We'll let her continue. Pam turned the page. The Middle Temple in the UK lists Roberts as an honorary venture. They've received grants from Soros-funded NGOs. That's not a theory. It's documented. And their U.S. affiliate is funneling ideology into American jurisprudence, justice. Thomas cleared his throat. What's your end goal, Miss Bondi? Pam's answer was immediate. Accountability. We don't let military officers hold secret meetings with foreign-funded organizations. Why should we tolerate it in the judiciary? She looked around. I'm asking this court to open an independent ethics review on Roberts, on the network, on the influence. Roberts didn't speak, but the storm had begun. The news didn't just ripple, it detonated. Cable networks flipped from the usual noise to a single breaking banner chief. Justice John Roberts linked to secretive legal group with Soros ties across America. Talking heads filled screens with speculation. The headlines blared, "Shadow Judiciary," "Legal Cabal Undermining Democracy," "Roberts Under Fire." But behind the scenes, Pam Bondi wasn't interested in theater. She was building a case meticulous, factual, surgical. In her downtown Deke office, now buzzing with staff and security, Bondi stood at the center of a whirlwind. The documents on her desk weren't just news clippings. They were evidence, dossiers, connection charts, records that, when pieced together, didn't just imply something sinister, they screamed it. She motioned for her deputy, Agent Caleb Moran, a former federal investigator with a mind like a filing cabinet. "Run it back for me," she said, eyes locked on a thick binder, plain and cold. Caleb nodded. "Roberts is a documented honorary member of the Middle Temple in the UK, a group that receives major funding from Soros-backed foundations," Pam interrupted. "And the Point U.S. connection, the American Inns of Court, Roberts, is a member, so are Judges Boasberg, Howell, and Maida, all D.C. Circuit players, all with recent rulings that blocked or stalled President Trump's immigration policies." "Convenient," Pam muttered. "And Kamala Harris's husband, Doug Emhoff, has appeared at the same. Private events, fundraisers, legal symposiums, some of which were hosted by the Middle Temple's affiliate branches." Pam leaned back in her chair. "They're not even trying to hide it. No, they're just hoping nobody connects the dots." Pam smiled faintly. Too late. 2 days later, she stood before a crowded press room. Podium lights harsh, but necessary. "Today, I raise questions about the integrity of one of our nation's highest offices," she began, voice firm, expression unflinching. She held up a folder. "This is not a conspiracy. These are facts. Chief Justice John Roberts is affiliated with an organization financially supported by foreign interests, including those tied to George Soros." Gasps rippled. Flashbulbs popped. She continued pacing. "Judicial impartiality is not a luxury. It is the bedrock of democracy. And yet, while overseeing politically explosive cases, Roberts has remained connected to a network that rewards judges for rulings aligned with one political ideology." A reporter raised a hand. "Are you calling for Roberts to recuse himself?" Pam's eyes sharpened. "I'm calling for his resignation." Dead silence. "This is no longer about opinion. This is about national security, judicial ethics, and foreign influence on American law." The press room exploded. News anchors across the nation scrambled for talking points. Liberals screamed witch hunt. Conservatives cried finally. But Pam Bondi didn't care for either side's applause. She cared about cleaning the house. In chambers at the Supreme Court, John Roberts sat alone. His clerks had gone quiet. Doors stayed closed longer than usual. On his desk, the same article that had sparked it all, Gateway Pundit, blasted his fringe, but their report had found traction. He picked up his phone. "Ketanji," he said when Justice Jackson answered. "We need to talk." She said, before he could continue, "I'm aware. You should step down, John." Roberts gripped the phone tighter. "I've done nothing wrong. It doesn't matter. This isn't about law anymore. It's about perception. If Pam keeps pressing, she doesn't scare me. She should." That night, Pam appeared on national TV. "We are witnessing an erosion of the separation between impartial justice and political activism," she said. "The highest court in our land cannot be led by a man whose alliances compromise that balance." Fox News called it historic. CNN called it dangerous. Twitter melted. Pam didn't flinch. In a wood-paneled conference room at DOJ headquarters, Bondi met with a group of constitutional law experts, federal investigators, and former ethics committee members. All had reviewed the materials, all saw the same problem. You can't impeach a sitting Supreme Court justice without House and Senate majorities. One warned, "We're not talking about impeachment," Pam said. "We're talking about leverage, public trust. If the people see this as corruption, and they do pressure builds, Roberts won't survive this in the court of public opinion." "What if he doubles down?" Pam's voice lowered. "Then we keep going. We expose everything." She tapped the table, the parties, the donors, the rulings, the favors. "We don't blink." A younger staffer looked up. "What's the end game?" Pam's gaze sharpened. "We take back the bench, back in the Supreme Court building." Justice Roberts sat at his desk as the TV played in the corner. Pam Bondi's face filled the screen. The appearance of impropriety is just as damaging as the act. Americans deserve better, and I intend to make sure they get it. He turned off the screen, stared at the black robe hanging on the dot wall. For the first time in years, it looked heavy. The echo of Bondi's speech had not yet faded when the Supreme Court released a quiet press statement. Chief Justice John Roberts maintains the highest standards of judicial ethics and impartiality. Any affiliation with legal organizations is in accordance with established norms and is unrelated to the court's decision-making. Pam Bondi read the statement in silence. Then she looked up and said what her aides were already thinking. "It's a deflection, and it's weak." She was standing at the center of what her staff had begun calling the war room, a converted briefing chamber in the DOJ building, stripped of decor, papered with court filings, flowcharts, and timelines. Red strings connected names and institutions. There were few pictures, but there were dozens of names. A new face had joined the circle, Marla Jensen, a veteran DOJ ethics prosecutor with a sharp jawline and sharper pen. She dropped a file onto the table. "We dug deeper," she said. "You're not going to like it." Pam opened the folder. Donations from Soros, backed Open Society, foundations to Middle Temple, $4.2 million over 10 years. A third of that earmarked for transatlantic legal exchanges. "So they're grooming judges," Pam muttered. "Or at the very least," Marla said, "they're influencing them." You combine that with the ins of court awards, the legal symposiums in London, the speaker honorariums. It's not a smoking gun, but it's a burning briefcase, and Roberts sits on a bench. That rules on immigration. "Foreign influence, national security," Pam added. Caleb spoke up. "They've built a pipeline, radical legal theory, dressed up in academic robes, passed to federal judges under the guise of professional enrichment." Pam was already halfway to the whiteboard. She grabbed a red marker. "We need to prove our influence, not just association. If we can show a pattern where these connections line up with rulings, the case builds itself." Caleb flipped open his laptop. "Done. Already pulled case data for Roberts, and the 3-point DC judges correlation is strong, especially with Judge Boasberg," Marla added. "And don't forget, Roberts publicly defended Boasberg 2 days after a controversial ruling blocked Trump's immigration order. That was the trigger for this firestorm." Pam turned. "Then that's where we strike. Judge James Boasberg was supposed to be a quiet functionary. Not anymore." Within 48 hours of Bondi's announcement, Boasberg's public record was under the nation's microscope. Legal pundits dissected every speech he'd given, every panel he'd joined, every trip taken on legal foundation dollars. One particular trip drew attention: London, 2021. A panel on post-national jurisprudence in a globalizing world, sponsored by Middle Temple, attended by Boasberg, Emhoff, and 2 EU legal scholars known for championing open borders. The photos were grainy. The conversations weren't recorded. but it was enough. On Capitol Hill, the pressure mounted. Senator Hawley opened a formal ethics inquiry. Senator Cruz began drafting a resolution to bar any judge who accepted foreign legal gifts from ruling on federal immigration law. Even centrist Democrats began to blink. On MSNBC, the normally reserved Joe Scarborough said it plainly, "If we flip the script," and Clarence Thomas had ties to a legal group funded by Koch or Bannon, the left would be calling for blood. Inside the Supreme Court, the tension was visible. Justice Alito had stopped attending informal lunches. Justice Gorsuch had issued a public statement defending judicial independence, which everyone read as a subtweet aimed at Roberts. Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson was said to be furious behind closed doors. Meanwhile, Roberts remained silent. But silence had begun to sound like guilt. Pam Bondi knew timing was everything. The moment for the next strike had arrived. She requested a closed-door hearing with the Senate Judiciary Subcommittee on Judicial Ethics. The chamber was small, but the cameras were rolling. "I have no vendetta," Pam began, "but I have a duty." She presented emails, meeting minutes, event guest lists. She displayed the award given to Judge Beryl Howell by the Inns of Court just days after she oversaw aggressive January 6th prosecutions. She laid out the Middle Temple's financial disclosures. And then she said it. "These are not random coincidences. This is the architecture of quiet influence, a pipeline of ideology, funding, and legal grooming designed to shape American jurisprudence from the top down." Senator Mike Lee leaned forward. "Do you believe Chief Justice Roberts knowingly accepted foreign influence?" Pam didn't hesitate. "I believe he knowingly accepted affiliation with those who promote it. Would you call that corruption? If a foreign-backed group gives you a medal, pays for your conferences, and places their allies in your chambers, what else do you call it?" The room buzzed the next morning. Politico leaked a memo allegedly authored by Roberts's own clerk, expressing grave concerns over the Chief Justice's refusal to distance himself from foreign-linked organizations. Bondi didn't leak it, but she didn't deny it either on Fox. On Twitter, the hashtag #ResignRobertStag hit trending. The pressure was boiling. Back at the DOJ, Pam stood at her window, watching the Capitol below. Marla walked in. "They're panicking," she said. "We have judges calling for internal reviews. A whistleblower from the Middle Temple is ready to speak." Pam nodded. "Let them scramble. We're not finished." The Supreme Court building, once a symbol of unwavering justice, had become ground zero for a silent civil war. On one side stood Pam Bondi, relentless in her mission to expose Chief Justice John Roberts. On the other, Roberts, silent, elusive, yet commanding enormous institutional power. Pam's strategy had shifted.